So my name is Branden Miller. I go by Fozzie Hacks. I'm going to do something a little unusual. Today is my wife's birthday, and I'm here. So I'm going to call her. Help me sing happy birthday to her, if you would. She loves it whenever I do this kind of stuff.
What's her name?
Hey, Gretchen.
Hey.
Hey, I just always tell you you're on the speakerphone. I just wanted to call and wish you a happy birthday and tell you I love you. I'm going to sing to you. All right? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Gretchen. Happy birthday to you. And just so you know, you can find that later on ironbeat.com. Love you, babe. Talk to you later. It's nonstop. So once again, Branden Miller, thank you everybody for doing that. I volunteered to do video like I do every year, not knowing exactly what day this was. So whenever she just said, I knew that I probably screwed up somewhere. And then I looked at the calendar and I was like, oh, I already gave him my word. She said, yeah, you did. And you gave it to me 20 years ago. So, all right. Hacking for homeschoolers, STEM projects for under $20. I speak a lot at conferences. Every year I do kind of a technical speech, and then the next year I do a non-technical speech. This is more of my technical speech. I gave one of these last year that kind of gave everybody an idea of what homeschooling is, how you can incorporate it into your lesson plans if you do that. And then this one's more of some of the projects that we've built. I highlighted one project last year, my 16-year-old did, where we literally took 17 boxes to Johnny Long in Africa, so I made her the project manager for doing that, as well as deploying some educational servers that I made her build. And by the way, whenever she was 14 at the time, whenever we started this, and I did make my 14-year-old do all of the Linux plugins and stuff like that, command line. So she loves me in her own special way now. So who am I? Well, I'm currently a principal security consultant for NTT Security US, formerly Solutionary. I've been that for 2 weeks now. I was a manager prior to that, but we just merged with a bunch of other companies, so I'm no longer a manager. I consider myself a hardware hacker, although I suffer from imposter syndrome, so I'll tell you I suck at it. I'm a dad. I have 3 kids and a foster kid right now. I'm a husband, obviously. You sang to my beautiful bride. And then I'm a Christian, which plays into why we homeschool and why one of the reasons why we made that decision. And plus, I worked for the federal government for 20 years, and I'm a little leery about their overreaching in certain areas. And officially, I am the dean of Wilman Way Academy. Anybody here from Kentucky? Do you homeschool? You know, you have to send that little letter every year saying you're going to homeschool your kids, and we picked an academy name. We actually have letterhead and all kinds of cool stuff. So I'm the dean. My wife is the teacher and the counselor and the cook and the lunch lady. But I've got the important job, right? So why are we doing this? This isn't necessarily why am I doing this, but why are we here today? Because science, right? STEM is, the first letter is science. I believe it's important that we teach our children at least fundamentals of scientific principles, or, if you go to public school, that we supplement what they receive from their public school education. It's easier to teach 3 students than it is to teach 30 students. And our experience with public school, from a child that was quote-unquote gifted and talented, but we discovered was dyslexic, is that the teachers don't necessarily focus on the larger percentages. They have to focus on their stellar performers so they can get them started, and then focus on their problem kids, and kind of that 60% in the middle sometimes gets overlooked. Well, why else? Well, technology. So the second letter is technology. It's basically learning mostly IT, information technology, things that you use. There's really not a lot of focus in normal public school on technology. They'll use it as a teaching tool. A lot of times they don't even know how to use it. You'd be surprised, our local elementary school in our community, I was talking to one of the teachers there. It's where we used to go to Cub Scouts with the kids. And she was remarking how she had this, $1,500 projector that was basically a paperweight, but she didn't know how to use it. They didn't provide any training on how to use the smartboard. So I actually helped train her and a bunch of the other teachers on staff there. Right after that, they actually gave them a teacher training day where they trained on that. But they had it in their classrooms for almost 6 months before they got trained on it. So that's just how public schools are sometimes. And then the last two are engineering and, of course, math. So that's what makes up the STEM and STEM. I used this picture to highlight the fact that, the government tends to focus on STEM. There's federal programs on it. We want to be #1 in the international testing marketplace. And I use the word marketplace because there's a lot of money involved. Not necessarily education, but money. And they tend to not focus on liberal arts and those studies. Music. It really disturbs me sometimes whenever teachers say, we don't teach music because math is more important. Music is math. It's fractions. When you struggle teaching a child math, you can use music to get those same learning objectives accomplished. So once again, our daughter that's dyslexic, when she struggles with math because she gets her numbers backwards and it's hard to add sometimes, we focus on music and that helps. Why else are we here? Because I don't want my kids living in a van down by the river, right? If I can do my little part to ensure that they're successful, and I'm not talking millionaires, I'm talking successful in life, that they set their own goals and they achieve them, then I'm happy. I would like for that to include self-sufficiency, but that's an argument my wife and I have a lot. Once again, I'm not saying liberal arts aren't important. My wife is one of the most intelligent people I know. She attended a little bitty college here in Kentucky called Georgetown College. It's a liberal arts school. But what they teach is how to tie theories constant and together throughout the entire learning engagement, or the whole 4 years that they're there. That's the purpose of liberal arts. It's not to study something very specifically that you don't know its effect on something else. So keep that in mind. My father-in-law, another very brilliant man, bought and sold multiple businesses, retired at age 52. He's a liberal studies major. He's one of the most technically competent people that I know. He can pick up things, read about them, and apply them. And he will tell you it's because he learned logic in college with his liberal studies degree. I love this lady. The other thing is, it's your moral obligation to our nation to study science, technology, engineering, and math. No, I'm being facetious. I put this up here as a reminder. If you are starting into the STEM programs, I challenge you to go out and read the history of why this came about. There are a lot of half-truths from the government. They'll tell you things like we're 30 of 50 industrialized nations. That's pretty bad. But they don't take things once again in this holistic approach. They'll say things like, how will NASA ever compete in the future if we don't have STEM now? NASA is actually an international organization. It just happens to be hosted here. Think about that. We pay the money for it. It's located here, but most of the people that work at NASA are no longer U.S. citizens. They're actually immigrants to this country. That's not a bad thing. We just put, rovers on Mars years ago. I say just, it's actually been years ago. That was done through an international effort. We are very good in this country at combining ideas. and making sure that they're actually, they're worked from the beginning all the way to the end, and that they're integrated into the next thing. So it kind of upsets me sometimes whenever people say, America. Okay. So I was in the military for 20 years. I believe in America, but I also believe in the international community and working together. By the way, the top 10 nations on that list of smartest nations in the world, they also have they're also on the same list for the number of teenage suicides. So keep that in mind. So, all right, but I don't homeschool. I beg to differ. If your kids are in school and you're not their primary teacher, you are their teacher. So when they come home, it's your job to actually fill that gap, supplement their public learning or private learning. And this continues through life, right? I used to tell my dad, I have better test scores than you, so I'm smarter than you. I remember these conversations when I was 15, 16, right? Apparently I'm not, because I'm still paying a mechanic whenever he fixes his own car, and that's very expensive. I should have listened whenever I was younger. Things like that. So just keep in mind, you may not be the primary educator, but as a parent, you're really screwing up if you're not teaching your kids something. Any questions so far? All right, now let's get into the meat of this. I can stop my rant and we'll start the fun stuff. So, he's like, So let's talk about gathering resources, because if you're going to do any STEM projects, you need resources, right? This is usually what public schools complain about the most. So the first thing I'll tell you is on trash day or garbage day, go around your community and pick up everything that your neighbors throw away. If it's electronic, grab it, because you're going to need those parts. Become a scavenger. This is actually something, it's a game now with my kids. They love it. They like bringing back things, especially unusual things. Like VCRs, apparently those are unusual with my children. But VCRs and printers are some of the best items you can get. The reason why I say that is because you not only have electrical components inside, but you also have motors, you have gears, you have rods that you can bend and make into unusual shapes. So go get stuff from your neighbors. Their trash is your treasure. It'll also save you a lot of money. The other thing is Craigslist. This is Lexington, Kentucky's Craigslist page as of yesterday. Number 2 is a nice tubed TV. Old school, right? Actually, it has a VCR connected to the bottom. I love these items. You have lots of things in there that you can use for STEM projects. Caution. If you get things such as old school TVs that have tubes and capacitors, they're going to have capacitors in there, right? Microwaves. Microwaves are very good too. I mean, they've got timers, they've got logic controllers, they have motors in them. Those capacitors in there will kill you. So avoid that usually upper right-hand section that has the big things that look like this maybe. Except they're like bigger. They look like cans sometimes, Coke cans. As a general rule, and I kind of hesitate in saying this, but I'll go ahead and say it. When you're looking at the markings, if you see something that's 1,000 microfarads or 1 millifarad, 30 volts, starting right at that area, that's whenever things are going to pop, they're going to spark, and they're going to scare the pee out of you. Anything below that is pretty safe. The higher that number gets, as in like, the further away from voltage you can get, the better. Let's put it that way. So if you have like 1 volt, 1,000 microfarads, you won't even feel that on your skin. So those are things that you will need to pay attention to. Anything that's a capacitor or an electron gun. So in old school TVs, you have electron guns, and their whole focus is to use electricity in such a way that they can focus the beam onto the screen. Those are like thousands of volts. They can be 1 farad or 0.5 farads. So 1,000 volts, 0.5 farads, that means you get cooked. So That old school TV, it's not for everybody. Everybody shouldn't use those. I like to take them apart. I just beat them with a bat first, and then whatever comes out afterwards, I salvage. So questions about that? Okay, just remember capacitors, they store charges, they dissipate very quickly. If it dissipates into your body, it can be bad.
Can you discharge it with something in there?
Yes, discharging it. Anything that's 100 micro, 30 volts or less, I discharge with a screwdriver. Anything above that, I don't touch. There are special tools you can buy for discharging capacitors.
How long will they hold the charge?
They can hold a charge for years. It depends on the state of what they're composed of. So a lot of your ceramic devices are going to be very low impact. You can touch those with your finger. But yeah, some of them can be years. They'll sit on a shelf charged. I discovered that the hard way in the Navy. I was working in an old school receiver, had no business working on it. They were going to get rid of it, and I was like, let me play with it. And that's first mistake, right? Second mistake was I opened the top, and it was still energized, plugged in, and started tinkering. I have a lot of EEGs in my medical records. Tools. Once again, you can get tools from Craigslist. Don't go crazy buying tools whenever you first start out. Accumulate them over time. Things I always recommend: a good pair of diagonal cutters, heavy scissors, heat shrink gun or a heat gun. If you don't have one, just use the what are those things called? Blow dryer. Yeah, blow dryer. There you go. I don't use them for blow drying my hair. I mean, I'm getting to the point where I don't need it, right? Yeah. And a good soldering iron. I mean, my first soldering iron was this little cruddy butane one. It cost me like $12, but I mean, it did its job. We're not building something that you're going to commercially produce and sell. We're literally just trying to get components off of boards and then solder them back together in some way that it holds, right? Sometimes for those 15 seconds that your kid needs to see something back. So keep that in mind. I love Harbor Freight and Northern Tools. If you've got one of those, it's probably the best tool loaner program out there. They'll probably last you 10, 15 days or 10, 15 usages. But, I mean, if you pay 30 cents for it, what does it matter, right? So questions about collecting resources or, no? Like I said, capacitors, remember that. Websites, so everything that we do at school, none of it starts out as original ideas. I always go to one of these websites I'm going to show you first, or back of the room, No Starch Press. They have some really good books. I recommend the Lego gun book. It rocks. My son loves it. Instructables. My son calls this Indestructibles because he loves building it and destroying it if he can. Usually once you build something and put it to its use, you light it on fire afterwards. So, Instructables. Sign up. They'll spam you or they won't. You can set the level of information that you get from them. A little bit more advanced is going to be Hackaday. This is a really good one. They'll give you notifications as well. I say advanced because they actually go up. They actually have a storefront that they can sell you different things. And if you're like, I don't have a tool to do that project, then they'll usually be able to sell it to you. They'll also sell single board computers, things of that nature that sometimes it can be hard to find from some of your little parts stores, like older Radio Shacks. Oh, well, those don't exist. I'll tell you, I raided our Radio Shack, whatever it's going on. Raided it. On YouTube, subscribe to Smarter Every Day. This is a dad. He's a scientist. It's a little high level, so middle school, high school. Not a lot of concepts. So he just goes right into the science sometimes. I'll usually, if we're going to introduce one of his ideas or projects, I'll review it a couple of times before we show it to the kids, because sometimes they can be a little confusing. But that brings us to this guy, the king of random. Love this guy. Absolutely love it. My son was actually building things. He's 10. My son and my daughter, she's 13. They were building things on their own. And I asked them, I was like, these are some really good ideas. It was one of those proud dad moments. I'm doing something right. They're doing this on their own. No, they found this website before I did. And they started building these items. So those are kind of the main ones. There's a lot of other things that I subscribe to. Magpie, sorry. It's Raspberry Pi's magazine. It's really good. They have a soft copy version that comes, I think, monthly. Most of mine just get kind of stuck over to the side. All of our Raspberry Pi projects are usually derived from something else, like Hackers for Charity or other organizations that we've used in the past. But yeah, this guy, it's great. Absolutely great. So examples of what your kids can do. Every one of these projects, except for one, my kids have already done. And usually what that means is I do them, and then I forget, because I forget that I'm supposed to be teaching them. And they complain about it. And then I go, oh yeah, I'm sorry. And then I help them do them. And then they complain about it because they're supposed to be doing them. And then they do it on their own. But like I said, every one of these is unoriginal. I get from the website. Usually about the third, fourth, fifth time we do one of these projects, they're just making stuff up on their own. And that's really what you want, right? You want your kids to be figuring out what does and does not work. Failure in STEM is necessary. Kids that don't fail, well, I was going to go somewhere. Failure is necessary. All right. So, a little word of caution. Well, not word of caution. I have to explain myself. So, the photos are not my photos. I suck at photography. This is my daughter. She's 16. She's why I started getting heavy into STEM, because she's like, Dad, I want to be an artist. I'm like, oh, what do I do? Because, art to me, I don't know it unless you can't define it, but whenever you see it, you know what it is. I still don't see it, so I can't explain what it is. So, like action shots, right? No blurs. She can make the background blur if she wants. Lighting. It's like perfect silhouette, right? Sun's behind it. I could never take that picture. Depth of field. Focus or lack of focus, right? And then you combine it all. This is what she does. She is going to be an artist someday. This is what I do with photography. So like I said, some of the photos are things that I've taken. A lot of them come from those websites that I gave you, because it's just, yeah, I know, that's cool. That's all right, so HD antennas. The very first project we did was probably 3 years ago now. My son was 7, daughter was 10. My other daughter was in Kenya with my wife. So I had to teach for 2 weeks. That was horrible. I used to complain about my wife being a homeschooler, not doing anything. And then she left me and went to Kenya for 2 weeks on a mission trip, and there I was. So I told you, being a Christian is important to me because I had to pray for 2 weeks straight. And we survived. So power of prayer. So this is the very first HD antenna we built. Literally foam board, glue gun, a template from Instructables, aluminum foil, and paper. So you cut it all out, you put it together, and it's an HF antenna. It's a track system. That's why it's 30 degrees. I think it's 30 degrees. Very good directional antenna. I actually got rid of my Radio Shack HD antenna whenever we built this. I was really surprised. My kids did an excellent job. So this is something that I gave instructions and scissors to a 7-year-old and 10-year-old. They built wonderful. And got rid of cable. A little bit more advanced. So this is a multi-directional antenna. It's actually bi-directional in theory. So by advanced, I mean this uses wood. They had to use power tools and a drill. They had to use a screwdriver and coat hangers. And of course a balun. I forgot to talk about that. Balun's the only thing I bought in this scenario. Everything else I had from scrap. Balun converts the RF from Usually antennas are what, 50 ohms, 100 ohms, somewhere between there, to 75 ohms, so that it can be used. You can build baluns. It's a lot of effort. You gotta get it right. I bought 6 of them for $7.50. So, and it involves a lot of wrapping if you want to build your own. So, no thanks. So I replaced the HD trap antenna system with this one, and we went from, I live in Lexington, Kentucky, where we really have no stations. We had 7 stations I could get. This one, actually, I pick up 2 Louisville stations. So that is almost 65 miles away to my house. With this, actually, I have 2 of these. So with 2 of these antennas, I get 13 stations now. So that rocks. If you do the math, if you actually have one of the mapping programs, any ham guys in here build your own antennas? I brought that to my Elmer, the guy that taught me, and he's like, that's a lie. So I brought my antennas, and he's like, oh, that's pretty cool. So he did all the analysis on it. Apparently they're good antennas. Fire starters. So my son's in Cub Scouts. I was a Boy Scout. I love fires. I love camping. I love shooting guns, too. That's another story. So whenever you talk about fire, that's a very technical topic. So you have to have 3 elements for any fire. You have to have oxygen, you have to have heat, and you have to have fuel. So you can incorporate something as simple as dryer lint, Vaseline, toilet paper rolls, and come up with your own chemical fire starters. If you don't have Vaseline, use candles, the wax from candles. Preferably paraffin wax, but wax candles. So this is beautiful because everything there is either combustible or meltable. And it's slow burning. So you can actually start fires. My son started a fire with wet wood using one of these whenever we were done. So I got to explain the whole theory of why fire is important, what you need for fire, and then you take away one of those elements, see what happens. So this was a whole week's worth of science based on this one project. It was great. A little bit less technical. You don't have all those things because you don't have your own dryer. I don't know. You have a Ziploc bag and water? Let's start a fire with that. Is it possible? Yes, it's possible. So you can hold the bag in a certain way, capture the light, focus the beam. Now you're talking about reflection, refraction, diffraction, diffusion. So these are all scientific terms you can incorporate with a bag of water and fire. This is what kid did in my fire, right? Let's say you don't have water in a Ziploc bag. Well, do you have plastic and urine? Capture it. Put it in a tight ball. You can do the same. This is actually a lot more effective than the bag of water. But yeah, kids love it. My son's like, I get to pee on plastic and start a fire? Let's do this. Come on. Wake up, wake up. First day of school, first day of school. Altoids can speaker. So yeah, this is kind of the finished product. And this was the parts list on Instructables. I mean, everything that came in this, except for the speaker, this jack right here, the 3.5 millimeter jack, came from just stuff that I got actually from my neighbor. Cleaned it up a little bit. Some of it, my neighbor throws out a lot of really good stuff just because he bought something new, right? So I destroy his old stuff and use it. But here, I mean, here's the finished product. So the first time I tried to incorporate AC, don't do that in projects. DC is much better. 9-volt battery is the way to go for most STEM projects at home. It is one of those, bad moments as dad whenever I'm like, Altoid, metal can, AC. I can insulate that circuit enough to make this work, and this isn't the original black can. Simple robots. This is really where my kids have taken off, and they love doing this. Once again, every one of these parts for this bipedal 2-footed robot came from two different things. And this was, if I remember right, this was either it was a printer. It was an old school line feed printer. Remember those? Yeah, I had one. Did not have one. And the metal pieces didn't. Right? Those are coat hangers. But, I mean, this thing ended up being like this tall. It was great. You know, the first one that we built was this one, the little spider. Has a little agitator motor and a huge battery that you don't need. But, I mean, that's really one of those tiny hearing aid batteries, right? And then my son was like, yeah, I want to use those color-coded things that you always tell me about in a project. So he doesn't know that they're resistors and what they're for, but he knows they make really good spider legs. So, just get creative. This first one, he actually designed. So, and by design, I mean, we drew it on a piece of paper. So, the second one, we got this from Instructables. But once again, I think the only thing we had to buy for this was the glue, because we ran out of glue sticks for the glue gun. So just have a good time, right? That's what it's all about. Electricity, whenever you're talking about electricity, do it the safe way. Like I said, don't use AC. AC's bad. Can be. My wife picked up a kit. It's called Snap Circuits. I think she got it on sale for like $15 at our local secondhand store. So it's really neat because it has something like a little breadboard, and you snap on the circuit diagrams. They have drawings that you can use. So we played with these for probably a couple of months and really got a good foundation of just electric circuits. And then my kids started building their own. So I challenged them with building those same circuits with stuff from my garage. So we don't use snap circuits anymore. We just go out to the garage and have fun. Once again, if you're using a battery, it's a lot easier and safer. They just know not to put the leads together. I wanted to introduce flight to my kids. I am not an aeronautics guy. I know very little. I know like drag and lift. That was more from submarines, which is the same principle. So how do you introduce flight in a fun way? Mini crossbows. So this, kingofrandom.com, like I said, that guy is wonderful. This mini crossbow is actually a laundry clip. That's how big it is. So they're fighting with matches, shooting each other. I know that idea. It sounded good in my head. It was on the video. Why not, right? Go outside.
What did you hear?
What's that?
What did you hear?
So, good question. If it hits a piece of wood and scrapes, it does catch on fire. Not the wood, but the match. So whenever you do this outside, because you're trying to be safe, you can start ground fires. So keep that in mind. A little bit more advanced, soda bottle rockets. Who doesn't have 2 liters? Well, we don't drink soda, so we had to actually go buy one. Right? And my son's like, I'll drink it, make it Sprite. So build this, put together a little baking soda and vinegar, that's your propulsion. Now, I'll warn you, the bigger the bottle, the more of that you have to have, and it's kind of tricky getting the timing down. Or you can go a little more fancy. This is a system with a catch system, and this little arrow right here, that's a little nipple that you can plug your bicycle pump up to, and pump it up until you can't pump anymore because your son weighs like 20 pounds and he's 10, right? The bicycle pump weighs almost as much as he does. And then you have this pull system so that you can read this thing. I love it. So that's just pressured with air. Or I've seen some of these with water. So either way, Instructables. That's where I got this from. And then to kind of wrap it up, these are some of the more complicated ones. My wife loves Hobby Lobby. They always have stuff on clearance. This is a little 2-liter bottle that holds a weather system. So you can go out and make judgments on how much rain did we have. You can write that down, keep that, or tabulate that over time. I tend to do just go out of my mind on these. So I looked at that and I was like, how can I make that better? We have Raspberry Pis lying around the house. So I found this website. It's called Raspberry Weather. They actually have all the software that you need to load on your Raspberry Pi, and they actually have Android and iPhone apps so that you can actually talk to the station remotely and download the information, right? And then you can export it into data tables and manipulate the data and things of that nature. So this is a really cool website. This is the one that we have not done yet, that I'm just itching to do whenever we have time. Unfortunately, I'm on the road 7 out of 8 weeks, so. Traveled 25%, they said. This was a pretty big one. This was my daughter whenever she was 14 in the middle of Kenya troubleshooting a Rachel Pi, which if you step over to HFC, they'll teach you all about Rachel Pis. It was like their first iteration of educational servers they deployed in Africa. And then that culminated with 2 things. Number one, she built 2 of these Pelican Pis, or ruggedized Pis. Solar power, take DC 12 volts all the way up to AC 240 volts, converts it to a nice clean 5 volt signal 2 amps out to run the Raspberry Pi internally. And then I got to ride her coattails. I've been trying to speak at ShmooCon for years. They always said no. Then a 14-year-old puts her application in, and I have to go whenever she gets selected because she's a minor. So yes, I do use my children as my own games. And once again, what? Come on, like you don't. All right, and finally, fail. Fail often, fail early, fail constantly. Some of the biggest hurdles that we overcome is our failure. And my kids know this, and I encourage them to fail. I mean, a 10-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 16-year-old are going to come up with some really dumb ideas when it comes to science. But it's their way of learning. They don't know it's dumb. Even whenever it fails, they know it's not dumb. They know it's a process. It's iterative. They have to keep fixing things. So there's that. Any questions? We don't really have a lot of time, do we? Oh, dang it. All right, yeah, any question? Yes, sir.
More like a comment. Here in Louisville, down on 7th Street, close to Algonquin, there's an electronics store. It's called Fearless. They have like everything you need in terms of electronics. If you take just any type of electronic you need down there, they more than likely have it. I've seen other people down there, like this one guy had a refrigerator. The motherboard blew a fuse. He called the company. They said, no, you have to buy this like $500 board.
Yeah.
He took it down there to Fearless. They're like, oh, here's the fuse. It was $1. He put the fuse in the refrigerator, came back up. And
So what's it called? Peerless?
Yeah, it's down on 7th Street.
7th and
yeah.
Algonquin.
That area. Close to Algonquin. So go down to 9th Street, take a left where it turns into 7th. But they have like everything you need down there. So yeah, it's a really good store to get electronics for.
Those stores are out of fashion.
They really are, so that's why it's.
So whenever you find one, it's a gym.
Exactly, yeah. Not a lot of people know about it, but it's a good one here in town. So.
Yes, sir.
Question for you about software.
Yes. I suck at software.
Okay, yeah. So I was going to ask, have you done much with the STEM stuff regarding software? Do you see a place where there's specific places where there's naturally good points of crossover between hardware, software, kind of to teach you all?
Yeah, I avoid software because I don't do software well. Like, I'm not a developer. The last language I learned to code in was BASIC, and that was 1991, and that was a 1-week crash course for the Navy, right before they said we don't use BASIC. I attempted C and some assembly and compiled languages. That was another 1-week course that I didn't know so well in. So yeah, Scratch was about the only thing I've ever used. Yes, sir.
There's some online Minecraft camps that teach how to create and stuff.
Yeah, I wouldn't even want to talk about that. Online Minecraft camps, it's literally like they have summer camps where you're on Minecraft servers and the whole school. I think at Besides Nashville, I was talking to somebody about they actually have remote schools now that are using Minecraft servers for the students to log in on.
Scrafty is one.
Who?
Scrafty.
Scrafty. Cool. Any other questions?
Here you go.
Learn to program with Minecraft. Boom!
Yeah.
And where did you get that book, sir?
Let's see, I think that was,
No Starch Press, right over in the corner. I have a lot of their books. And they even have like a children's Python book. I can almost keep up with that one.
Apple just opened up their Swift Playground with iOS 10. That's pretty good.
Apple Swift Playground.
Yeah, it's called Swift Playground. It came out with iOS 10, but it helps develop iOS apps through their Swift program.
Oh, cool.
It's a really cool, kind of like, almost like a Scratch kind of, because it's more point, click, and drag.
So you can help build iOS apps.
Yeah.
So if you want to be part of the man, but feel like you're not.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding. Yes, sir.
another suggestion for the younger crowd that aren't quite up to scratch yet
Yeah.
is Codable.
Codable.
It's
Yes.
It's a game on the iPad. They are learning all kinds of programming concepts and have no clue to do it.
So back to that logic discussion I was talking about before. Part of why I suck at code is because I have a hard time with non-physical. I'm a tactile person, so I still print out email sometimes. If I'm really concerned about what it says, I'll print it out and mark it up. But that's because I was never taught logic until a later age. So I was probably in my 30s before I actually had a course on logic. And that's pretty sad. So if you can teach your kids logic early, then it becomes part of their life. And I don't mean, like, there's a difference in, like, say, math and everything else. So A equals B equals C, therefore A equals C is excellent in math. You can prove that. Water, or I'm a boat, I'm driving through water. Water is just like a cloud because that's made of water. So whenever an airplane flies through a cloud, you're in essence a boat. That's not logic, right? So it's important because that's how a lot of our schools teach logic. You start out at one area and then you just chain events and end up with a result. That's not logic. So, but yes, thank you. I appreciate that. So what's our time? Oh, I got 3 minutes. Usually I go way over on these, so that's why I was rushing a little bit now. Anything else? All right. Well, cool. Follow me on Twitter, FozzyHacks, F0ZZIEHAKZ. I will tell you 2 things. I'm a technologist, so I'll tweet a lot about that, but I'm also a Christian, so sometimes whenever I have issues, I will spam you with those kinds of ideas and concepts and my struggles. So you could go for weeks with nothing but Jesus, and then go for months with nothing but technology. So keep that in mind. I would say follow me on Facebook, but I only accept actual friends and family, so not acquaintances. LinkedIn, I'll trade cards with you, but I'd rather do LinkedIn. All right, thanks guys, appreciate it.